Hi everyone and welcome to Shaluso, and yes, today we are talking about Rolex predictions. At the time of filming this, there's about 10 days left until Rolex releases their new models. And as always, Rolex is both the most predictable brand, but also kind of the least predictable, because every time we think we've cracked the code, they come up with something we don't expect, and then somehow it's still not that surprising anyway. But in any case, I'm going to talk about my predictions for the 2021 releases of Rolex. Let's start out with the Rolex prediction that a lot of channels and forums have been talking about and circulating, and that is this rumored sort of new Daytona. There's a few renderings out there, or images, or what look like images, of a 41mm Daytona with a blue ceramic bezel and blue subdials. I want to give a big shout out to RX8 Golden Shield for providing me with the standard steel 116500LN that I used to make this video rendering. Hopefully the more watches and more content that I get, I can start making more video renderings for my predictions instead of just the Photoshop ones. But in the meantime, we can feast our eyes on this. Let me know in the comments below if you like what this looks like and if this is something you'd want to see them actually make. I personally don't think this is going to happen, purely because it's too early in this current generation of Daytona's life cycle. Now, I know that I've often said that the Daytona has barely changed since 1988. Apart from the movement and throwing a ceramic bezel on, it's basically the same design. However, in Rolex's eyes, this generation has been only going on since 2011 when they introduced the ceramic bezel. So I think that for the most part, we're not going to see any huge change within the collection. The only way I can see them making this is if they use it to replace the Yachtmaster II. Now that might sound crazy, but in the 60s, the concept of the Yachtmaster originally was based on the Daytona. The idea was that they just had a 15-minute indicator on the minute subdial of a standard Daytona from that time, and that was going to be the original Yachtmaster. Something to that effect. It was just an extension of the Daytona line instead of the Yachtmaster II that we have today. So I think that would be an interesting callback to history. Obviously the story changed over the last few decades. It went from that to then being a potential Rolex Submariner replacement in the 90s. However, Rolex didn't have the balls to completely change the design of the Submariner so much, so to play it safe, they introduced the Yachtmaster as a separate line. Then in 2007, we got the Yachtmaster II. I'll talk more about the Yachtmaster II a bit later as part of my other predictions, but the point being, I don't see this as being something that's actually going to happen. All that being said though, I do see a small change in the Daytona lineup, and that is them introducing the ceramic bezel on the full gold versions. Now, this is a slight modification on my prediction from last year, which didn't end up coming true. Last year I predicted ceramics across the board. That didn't happen. I think they'll start out with just the gold one. In terms of business, it just makes sense because on the full gold ones, they can replace that gold bezel, keep charging the same thing, if not just do a price hike on the premise of the fact that it's new, and then they can make better margin on it because ceramic is cheaper than gold. But more importantly, this also allows them to have a test bed of what to do with the two-tone versions a year, 2 years later, in terms of whether they release the new two-tone ones with ceramic bezels instead of gold ones. And again, that will be another opportunity for them to make more money. It's always important to remember that Rolex is a business first and foremost, and of pretty much every watch brand, they're the ones who show most unashamedly that they are a business. You know, they don't pander to what enthusiasts or what the internet asks for. They make what they know will make them more money, and they stick to that to a T. Think whatever you will of it. You can't blame them. They are about their business and they stick to it. So I think this would be an easy move for them to make, a good way for them to test the waters, a good way for them to continue standardizing what they create, especially within the Daytona line, because also, again, they don't need to release anything too drastic because it's not like it's difficult for them to sell Daytonas. It's just a case of how many more and how much more money can they make per Daytona sold. My next prediction is one that, again, most people have talked about, and this is one that I'm much more confident in actually happening, and that is a new Explorer II. Quite a few reasons for that. First off, it's the 50th year anniversary of the Explorer II in general. It's been 10 years since we got the last Explorer II, and also Rolex has already demonstrated with their GMT line, as well as the new Submariner, that they are killing off the 3-1 series of movements, moving everything to the 3-2s, with the Parachrome hairsprings, with the 70-hour power reserves, and I can easily see them putting all these reasons together as a good excuse to update the Explorer II, which still runs on the 3187 movement, which is based on the old GMT's 3186 movement. So obviously it'll have a new movement called the 3287. I think it'll keep the same size. This is already a 42. Rolex is moving into slightly bigger watches, but this is already there, so they won't change that. The biggest changes, I think, will be the bezel, which I think will turn into a ceramic. I think maybe a brushed ceramic, just to keep it slightly different and keep with the all brushed look of the Explorer II. And also in terms of color, I think there's going to be a few big differences. I think being an anniversary edition, they'll throw some green in there in the form of a green bezel, maybe a green bezel and green dial, either as standard production or as a complement to the collection in the form of some sort of, anniversary edition like the Kermit. And then also, I think they'll replace that orange in general with green on the 24-hour hand as well as on the text, largely because they've taken the green and the monochromatic bezel out of the GMT line. This is an easy way for them to attract more people to the Explorer II, alleviate a bit of pressure on the GMT collection. It all sort of makes sense, in my view, for them to do that. And it's a good way for them to really let this collection shine because it has always historically played sort of second fiddle to the GMT, especially in the last few years where all the hype has been going on. And then my last prediction, bringing it back to the Yachtmaster II that I mentioned earlier today, I think they'll introduce a full black version, black dial, black bezel of the Yachtmaster II. Now, the Yachtmaster II was first announced in 2007, released in 2010, steel version in 2011. 2011 being 10 years ago. Again, if the last few years are anything to go by, 10 years seems to be the increment that Rolex goes for when they want to replace their collections. However, with the Yachtmaster II, because it hasn't sold that well recently and because of all the money they must have spent on developing that movement, I don't think they're going to bring a real new generation to it. I don't think they're going to invest that much money into updating it, thinking it'll sell more. Instead, I think just variations is all we'll get for a little while longer from this. So I think what they can do by releasing a black dial, black bezel, they address one of the biggest problems with the Yachtmaster II, which is that Rolex buyers in general, they don't really go for what's different. The Yachtmaster II sticks out like a sore thumb amongst all of the Rolex models. It's much bigger. It's got a different dial configuration. It's got a weird looking bezel. It's got a complicated complication. It's so incredibly different. I think by introducing a standard black dial, black bezel, it'll just seem more familiar. And familiarity, conservatism, and being made in steel, these are all things that spell out a good recipe for Rolex, and it's a way for them to make more money off it at the end of the day. The Yachtmaster II is one of the models that you can still find at retail in a Rolex AD without a weight, so obviously it means it's an area they're going to want to address. So they'll either kill it off or do something different to try and sell more. And this is a way that they can do something that will probably make it more appealing to more people, and at the same time, they'll be able to make some more money out of the sizable investment they must have done in developing the caliber for this watch. And then the last thing I want to touch on is discontinuations. I think that we've seen over the last few years Rolex consolidating its collection and updating a lot of its movements. I don't think that we're going to see the Explorer I discontinued this year, even though it's one of 3 collections still using the previous generation of movements, purely because they don't want to take any attention away from the Explorer II. So Explorer-wise, I think things are going to stay the same. What I do think they might kill off is the Milgauss or the Air King. The Milgauss historically is a watch that's come and gone over the last few decades, so I wouldn't be surprised if they kill it off because, again, it had its heyday. Some models sell well, but others you can still find in ADs, and Rolex's job is to try and get these out of the ADs. So one way to do that is to discontinue it, build some hype around it being discontinued, and then bring it back later. Same thing with the Air King. That was originally part of a collaboration with the SSC Bloodhound, which was going for a land speed record. That, again, it suffered from a similar thing to the Yachtmaster. It looked a bit different, so people didn't really buy it. It's one of the Rolexes I actually like the most because it looks so different, and I think it actually, in the grand scheme of Rolex, offers good value, and the fact that you can actually get it at retail doesn't hurt either. If you buy it pre-owned, you might even get a little bit of a discount. So in my view, I think it's an appealing watch, but obviously for Rolex as a business, again, if it's still in the ADs, it means it's not selling well for them. So I think that maybe they can discontinue that and play the same game. If they see that people miss it, if they see there's a huge demand, then they might bring it back later with the new movement and then see how it goes from there. But in any case, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of all these predictions? Which ones do you think will actually come true? Which ones do you think won't happen? What are some of your predictions? And what do you want to see from Rolex in 2021? I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. And of course, if you like this video, make sure you like it and share it. If you want to see more of the pictures and infographics featured throughout this video and all my others, make sure you follow me on Instagram at Shaluso. And if you want to see more watch videos, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell as well so you know when the next video comes out. In any case, thanks for watching this video, and we'll catch you on the next one.